Right now, while you are watching this video, only 3% of the people on this planet are building real wealth from rare talent. Only 7% inherited it. Only 15% invested their way into it. 75% built it by owning something, a business, an asset, a piece of the machine instead of just a seat inside it. And the employees, the people who simply show up, clock in, and collect a paycheck, 0%, not 4%, not even 1%, 0. Let that number sit with you for a second, because if you are one of the millions of people trading 40 hours a week for a salary and nothing else, that stat is not just a number. It is a warning. It means the system you have been trained since childhood to trust, go to school, get a job, work hard, retire someday, produces a 0% chance of actually building wealth on its own. 0. Here is the sentence nobody writes on a classroom whiteboard. If you do not own something, you are what is owned. Your time gets owned. Your energy gets owned. Your entire month gets rented out to somebody else's dream while yours sits quietly in a drawer, waiting for a day that keeps getting pushed back. But here is the part that should really unsettle you. This is not a new problem wearing a new mask. It is an old one. Thousands of years ago, humans worked for exactly one reason. Food, water, shelter. Survive today so you get the privilege of doing it all again tomorrow. There was no concept of a weekend off, no retirement account waiting at the end of it. You worked because the alternative was starving, and everyone around you accepted that as simply how life worked, because nobody had ever seen it work any other way. Now fast forward to this exact moment, the one you are sitting in right now. The reasons have new names: rent, car payments, insurance premiums, grocery bills, but the cycle underneath it is identical. Paycheck arrives, and within days, sometimes hours, it is already gone, absorbed by obligations that existed before the money even landed in the account. It is not slavery in chains anymore. It is slavery in subscriptions, minimum payments, and interest rates. And the strangest part of all, most people never even notice they are living inside it, because it does not feel like a trap. It feels like normal life. It feels like the version of adulthood everyone told you to expect, so nobody stops to question it. Here is the uncomfortable question hiding underneath all of this. If you stopped working tomorrow, completely and permanently, how many weeks would your current life actually survive before it collapsed? For most people watching this right now, the honest answer is somewhere between a few weeks and a couple of months. That is not a personal failure. That is what happens by default when every dollar that arrives has already been claimed before it shows up. So here is my question for you before we go any further. Which one are you going to be? Someone who spends their whole life working to survive the month, or someone who builds something that eventually works for you quietly in the background while you sleep? If you want to know the actual answer, stay with me, because in the next few minutes I am going to hand you the exact framework that some of the wealthiest people on earth quietly use to turn an ordinary paycheck into a growing pile of assets. And before we go there, if you're serious about closing that gap between the 75% and the 0%, hit subscribe right now. This channel exists for one reason: to make sure you are never standing in that 0% column again. My name is David Marshall, and for years now I have been obsessed with one question. Why do two people who earn the exact same income end up in two completely different financial futures? Not luck, not some secret stock tip whispered in a group chat. Structure, a system, something so simple you could scribble it on the back of a napkin, yet so powerful that almost nobody actually follows it all the way through. It is called the 25-15-50-10 system, and today I am going to walk you through exactly how it works, who it works for, and why the order you apply it in matters just as much as the amount of money you start with. Stick around, because the middle of this video contains a comparison between two people that genuinely might change how you think about every single dollar you earn from this point forward. Here is the entire system in one breath. 25% of your income goes toward growth. 15% goes toward stability, 50% covers your essentials, and 10%, just 10, goes toward rewards. 4 buckets, 4 completely different jobs. And once you understand what each one is actually doing behind the scenes, you will realize something uncomfortable. Most people are not broke because they do not earn enough money. They are broke because their money has no job description. It just wanders into whatever account is closest and disappears. Let us start with the bucket that actually builds wealth: 25% growth. This is the portion of your income that stops working for your current lifestyle and starts working for your future self. It is not for bills. It is not for fun. Its entire job description is to grow quietly in the background while you are at work, while you are asleep, while you are living your normal everyday life completely unaware that it is compounding. And I want to show you exactly why the timing of this bucket matters more than almost anything else in your financial life. So let me introduce you to two people. The first is a guy named Marcus. Marcus starts investing at age 20. Every single month, without missing a beat, he puts $200 into the market. He keeps doing this for 40 years straight. By the time he is done, he has personally contributed $96,000 of his own money over 4 decades. The second is a guy named Derek. Derek does things differently. Life happens, responsibilities pile up, and he keeps telling himself he will start once things settle down. He finally begins investing at age 30, a full 10 years after Marcus. But once Derek starts, he is disciplined about it too. He puts in $300 every single month for 30 years straight. By the end, Derek has contributed $108,000 of his own money. That is $12,000 more than Marcus put in out of his own pocket. So here is the question I want you to actually sit with for a second. Who ends up richer? Assuming a 10% average annual return, which is roughly what the stock market has historically returned over long stretches of time, Marcus, the guy who invested less money overall, finishes with somewhere around $1.26 million. Derek, who contributed more of his own cash, finishes with around $678,000. Read that again if you need to. Marcus put in $12,000 less than Derek and ended up with almost double the total wealth. Not because he was smarter, not because he picked better stocks or timed the market perfectly, because he started 10 years earlier and those 10 years never had to be caught up on. They just quietly compounded the entire time. This is the part almost nobody explains properly. Growth is not primarily about how much money you throw at it. It is about how long that money gets to sit there, untouched, multiplying on itself year after year, decade after decade. 10 years does not sound like a big deal when you are 20 years old and life feels endless. But in the world of compounding, those 10 years might be the single most expensive decision you will ever make, or the single most profitable one, depending entirely on which side of the Marcus and Derek story you land on. Picture a snowball at the very top of a long hill. In the first few seconds, it barely grows at all. It just rolls slowly, picking up a thin layer of snow that is almost impossible to notice. But give that same snowball an extra 10 years of hill, and by the time it reaches the bottom, it is not a snowball anymore, it is closer to a boulder. Marcus gave his money 40 years of hill. Derek only gave his 30. That single difference is the entire reason the ending numbers look nothing alike, even though Derek technically worked harder and contributed more of his own cash along the way. So now the obvious question, where does this 25% actually go? Think of growth assets in 3 tiers: low risk, medium risk, and high risk. On the low risk end, you have something like an S&P 500 index fund. This is essentially a single investment that owns a tiny slice of the 500 biggest companies in America. You are not gambling on one company surviving or one founder's genius. You are betting on American business as a whole continuing to grow the way it has for well over a century. On the medium risk end, you have something a little different. Specifically your high income skills. Copywriting, coding, sales. These are abilities that once developed can dramatically raise your earnings ceiling, which means more fuel getting poured into that 25% bucket every single month without needing a raise from anyone else's approval. And on the high-risk end, you have businesses. Starting one from scratch, buying an existing one, building something out of nothing but an idea and a few late nights. This is where most of that 75% from our opening stat actually comes from. Higher risk, absolutely, but also historically where the biggest wealth outcomes on the planet get created. If you want to go a level deeper, there is something called a 3-fund portfolio, a simple structure that spreads your investments across a few different types of funds instead of stacking everything into one basket. And there is an important difference between accumulation funds, which are built for growing your money aggressively over decades, and distribution funds, which are built for later in life, once you are actually withdrawing from what you spent all those years building. And here is something a huge number of people completely ignore: tax-advantaged accounts. If your employer offers a pension match or a retirement matching program and you are not contributing enough to capture the full match, you are quite literally leaving free money on the table every single pay period. On top of that, using the right accounts can help you legally reduce how much of your gains get eaten up by capital gains tax, which means more of your own money stays invested, stays compounding, instead of quietly disappearing before it ever had the chance to grow. But here is where I need to stop you for a second, because growth alone can actually be dangerous if you skip the next bucket entirely. Without it, one emergency can wipe out years of compounding in a single afternoon, and I mean that literally. 15% goes into stability, and this bucket has exactly one job: keep you out of debt the moment life throws something unexpected at you. Here is what actually happens to most people who skip this bucket. Car breaks down, medical bill shows up out of nowhere. Job disappears overnight with zero warning. And suddenly they are pulling money straight out of their growth bucket at the worst possible moment, forced to sell investments low just to cover an emergency, or even worse, sliding into high-interest debt to survive the month. Either way, years of quiet compounding gets interrupted or erased in a single event. Think back to Marcus for a second. Imagine Marcus hits year 15 of his investing journey, everything is compounding beautifully, and then his car engine gives out completely on the same month his landlord raises the rent. Without a stability bucket sitting there ready, Marcus has exactly two bad options: sell off part of his growth investments at whatever price the market happens to be offering that week, or put the repair on a credit card and start paying interest on top of an already stressful month. Either choice quietly drags down everything he built in the growth bucket. This is the entire reason stability exists. It is not there to make you money. It is there to protect the money that is already busy making you money. So how much should actually live in this bucket? Take your core monthly expenses, the true non-negotiables, and multiply that number by 5 months. That total is your stability fund target. This money follows 3 strict rules, and I want you to actually remember these. First, it needs to be accessible within 24 hours. No waiting periods, no penalties, no phone calls to unlock it. Second, zero exposure to stocks or cryptocurrency. This is not the bucket where you chase returns. This is the bucket where you guarantee safety, full stop. And third, keep it sitting in a high-yield savings account, something earning around 4 to 5%, so it is not just parked there doing nothing. It is quietly earning a little something while it waits for an emergency that hopefully never comes. To keep this bucket funded without having to think about it constantly, set up an automatic transfer the moment your paycheck lands. If you ever have to dip into it for a real emergency, replace what you took out as fast as your budget allows. And a small trick a lot of people use without even noticing the impact: round up savings apps. The kind that take your everyday purchases and round them up to the nearest dollar, quietly stacking spare change straight into your stability fund in the background of your normal life. Now we get to the biggest slice of the entire pie, and also the most dangerous one if you're not paying attention. 50% essentials. This bucket covers the non-negotiables: housing, transportation, groceries, insurance, the stuff that keeps your actual life running day to day. But here is where most people quietly sabotage themselves without even realizing it is happening. They let their essentials creep past 50% little by little, because it never arrives all at once. It happens one small upgrade at a time. A bigger apartment because a raise came through. A nicer car because the old one started to feel a little embarrassing in the work parking lot. This pattern has a name: lifestyle creep, and it might be the single sneakiest wealth killer that exists, because it disguises itself as progress the entire time it is quietly draining your growth and stability buckets dry. Here is the trap in plain language. Every time your income goes up, your essentials quietly try to rise right along with it, and if you let them, you can end up earning 3 times what you used to make while still feeling exactly as tight on money as you did back at your very first job. The goal is not to live like you are broke forever. The goal is to let your growth and stability buckets grow proportionally too, instead of letting every single raise get absorbed by a slightly nicer version of the same lifestyle. Let me tell you about a woman named Rachel. Rachel used to make almost every purchase decision in the exact moment the urge hit her. She would see something online at 11 p.m., add it to her cart, and complete the purchase before she had even finished thinking about whether she actually needed it. Then she started using something called the 7-day rule. Before any non-essential purchase, she waits a full 7 days. No exceptions, no talking herself out of the rule, and here is what she discovered. Around 60% of the things she wanted to buy, she completely forgot about within that week. The urge just evaporated on its own. The other 40%, if she still wanted the item after 7 days had passed, she would buy it completely guilt-free, because at that point it was not an impulse anymore, it was an actual decision she had thought through. Alongside the 7-day rule, there is another mental shift worth making: comparing value instead of chasing brand names for the sake of a logo. One tool people use here is something called cost per wear, or more broadly cost per use, taking the price of an item and dividing it by how many times you will realistically use it. A cheap pair of shoes that falls apart after 2 months might actually cost you more per wear than a well-built pair that lasts 5 full years. Value is not always about spending the smallest number possible. It is about spending in a way that actually holds up. So if 25% grows your future, 15% protects your present, and 50% keeps your day-to-day life running, what on earth is the last 10% for? This is exactly where most budgeting systems quietly fall apart, and it is the number one reason so many people abandon their budget within a few months of starting it. 10% goes into rewards, and I want to be completely clear about why this bucket exists, because it is not indulgence. It is strategy. Anyone who has ever tried to save aggressively already knows this feeling in their bones. The tighter you squeeze your spending, the more likely you are to eventually snap and blow through way more money than you ever intended to. There is a real term for this, saving fatigue, and it is one of the biggest reasons budgets fail, not because people do not understand money, because a system with zero room to breathe eventually breaks under its own pressure. There was a guy named Tyler who found this out the hard way. Tyler was the kind of person who tried to save nearly every single dollar that came through his account. No dinners out, no new clothes, nothing that even smelled like a treat. For about 4 months, he was basically a machine. And then one weekend, without much warning even to himself, he snapped and spent almost $2,000 in a single day on things he did not even really want in the first place. All because he had never given himself permission to enjoy any of his own hard-earned money along the way. After that crash, Tyler rebuilt his entire system around the 10% rewards bucket. He opened a separate account just for it, something people following the system like to call a joy jar, money that is completely guilt-free to spend because it has already been accounted for ahead of time. And here's the twist that actually surprised him. Once Tyler knew that money was coming automatically every single month, the urge to blow everything all at once basically disappeared on its own. The system finally gave his brain permission, so his brain stopped rebelling against it. One more thing about this bucket that matters more than people think: where you actually spend that 10% changes everything. People who put their rewards money toward experiences, a trip, a concert, a weekend away with people they care about, tend to report far more lasting satisfaction than people who spend it on status purchases, the kind of things bought mostly to be seen by other people rather than genuinely enjoyed. Experiences turn into memories you carry with you. Status purchases mostly just turn into clutter sitting in a closet. So let us zoom all the way back out for a second, because I want this to actually stick with you. 25% growth, building your future through index funds, high-income skills, and businesses. 15% stability, 5 months of core expenses sitting somewhere safe and accessible within 24 hours. 50% essentials, covering your real life without letting lifestyle creep quietly eat away at your future one small upgrade at a time. And 10% rewards, your joy jar, the piece that keeps the entire system sustainable enough that you actually stick with it past month 2. Remember Marcus and Derek? The gap between them was never about intelligence, income, or luck. It was 10 years. 10 years turned $12,000 fewer dollars into nearly double the final wealth. That is really what this entire system is about. Not just knowing where your money should go, but finally understanding that time is the one ingredient in this whole equation you can never buy back once it is gone. Go back to that opening stat for a second. 75% entrepreneurs, 15% investors, 7% inheritors, 3% rare talent, 0% employees living paycheck to paycheck with nothing quietly working for them in the background. This video was never about telling you to walk into your boss's office and quit tomorrow. It was about making sure that whatever paycheck you do earn, some piece of it stops being spent the moment it lands and starts being owned instead. Because at the end of the day, if you do not own something, you are what is owned. If this video finally made sense of something you have been confused about for years, that is exactly why I make these videos. Hit subscribe right now, because next time I am going to walk you through exactly how to calculate your own personal numbers for each of these 4 buckets, based on your real income, your real expenses, and your real life. Not some generic formula copied from a textbook, your formula. This is David Marshall, and I will see you in the next one.